My fellow Ambalanders, my fellow Ambazonians, citizens of our great nation, before I stepped into my office to make this address, I received an indelible statement from one of my advisors, and I would like to read that statement to you people. There is no law, no religion, or morality that will ultimately disfavor a people who are fighting to maintain the land which is their natural habitat. Geography and history are only markers of natural habitat. There is no law, no religion, or morality. And I may add, there is no force that will ultimately disfavor a people who are fighting to maintain the land which is their natural habitat. Geography and history are only markers of natural habitats. My fellow citizens, each time there are international events, each time we are in a crossroad, I step forward to provide clarity to our people. We are in a war of liberation in the 21st century, where the instant nature of information, propaganda, and distortion can change a narrative overnight. If we were in the 60s, nobody would have probably realized that President Macron was in Yaoundé. Most of you wouldn't have read the interview granted by the US ambassador to the Post newspaper. The narrative propagated by the Liberation Front would have remained in your mindset and in your memory. But in the 21st century, information control, construction of narratives can make or mar a struggle. And it is critical for Ambazonia that leadership steps up immediately to provide clarity, context, and a continuous appeal to our people to remain focused. First, let me salute the Ambazonian people across the globe. Those in Boya, those in Kumba, in Selele, those in Wum, those in Mavas, those in Bamenda, those in Iwai, those in Kugwe, those in the great state of Bui. I salute the people of Menji. I salute all of you, Amazonians in exile across the globe who have remained committed and dedicated to our struggle for self-preservation and the protection of our homeland and territorial integrity. I send my gratitude to our forces, the brave men and women who took up arms 5 years ago to defend our land, to defend our people, and to defend our freedom. Ambazonia will never thank you enough for the sacrifices you make. But I want you all to know, this nation will remember you all through time and space. The sacrifices you made for our people, the sacrifices you made in the defense of our country. We have thousands of our people in jail, locked up because they stood up for an ideal whose time came and for values that are universal in nature. The brave patriots who have been deprived of their liberty for 5 years, for 7 years, and some for the past 20 years. Ambazonia owes you a huge debt of gratitude for not giving up, for not blinking. I also want to thank our bike riders. At a time when the international system, Western countries are building cars without drivers, when unmanned aerial vehicles are determining the outcomes of war, our educated men and women are still struggling on bikes. They are riding on bumpy roads to make ends meet. That shows us how far behind we are. That at a time when the world is on the fast lane, we are on tiptoe stance on subsistence methods. At a time when the world is converting refuge into renewable energy that powers the next generation of new economies, lighting homes, providing opportunities in terms of employment for millions, keeping the health of our people in shape so they can become contributors to the generation of more wealth. Ambazonians are still on tiptoe stands with their cities blocked by refuge, foreign companies making millions out of the demise of our people. At a time when national identities are being strengthened across the globe, Ambazonia is still grappling with a foreign and alien rule that has been over our heads for hundreds of years. Exactly 143 years ago, the first encroachment and establishment within our territory by the British took place. Between then and now, Amazonia has faced many colonial powers. It was the British, then the Germans, then the British again. We also face international systems, alien concepts like German colonialism, brutal takeover of our country for purposes of economic benefit and enslavement. Then post-World War I, it was the mandate system, where the Amazonian territory was given to the British as a mandate territory. Then we live under the trusteeship system, then back to another colonial power, France and Cameroon. The reason for my outing today is to remind us the basis upon which our struggle rests and the best methods we are going to use to end Cameroon's impunity and the strategies we are going to use internationally to undermine an international system dedicated to the preservation of stability at the expense of freedom. Each time freedom fighters talk about their struggles, they always say they have a cause, that they fight for a cause. A cause is rooted in several international aspects. I have just read the advice from an advisor about the natural markers in liberation struggles like ours. The basis of Ambazonia's claim to its territory and the validity of that claim will determine the kind of conflict resolution schemes that the international system will adopt. Let me say it again, and this is very important. The basis of Ambazonia's claim to its struggle for independence will define the kind of conflict resolution scheme that the world will put in place. It is also on the validity of the basis of that claim that the narrative of the international system will change. I know this sounds a bit complex, but this is very important. And I will link this up to the interview of the US ambassador and the visit of the French president. The reason why the world has instituted a so-called negotiations framework that has collapsed was based on the assumption that Ambazonia is an integral part of the Republic of Cameroon. This assumption will determine the kind of conflict resolution system that will be put in place. This assumption that we are an integral part of the Republic of Cameroon will determine the narrative that the international system will construct when they talk about the Ambazonian question. The assumption that we are an integral part of the Republic of Cameroon will determine the attitude of Cameroon and its actors, and the assumption that we are an integral part of the Republic of Cameroon will also determine whether the world embraces our struggle for freedom or not. I have seen several groups, they are dabbling with the question of identity and nomenclature. They are dabbling with the name of our country. I read the press release of the CDN, where they use Southern Cameroons as a definition of the Northwest and Southwest. As a definition. They acted almost like smart researchers, where they are able to inform the world that they are talking about the Northwest and Southwest, but they will define it in this press release as Southern Cameroons. I still see the consortium leadership dabbling with the name Southern Cameroons, SCNC going along with Southern Cameroons. Why the world is embracing Ambazonia, not only as a name, but as an identity and a geographic description, and what my advisor talked about, a natural habitat. We have prominent Ambazonian groups still dabbling with the question of identity. that informs the kind of construction of narrative by the international system. Let me take you back in time. This is important. I would like everybody to be patient. I know I always come like I'm lecturing, but this is critical. Recall when we declared our right to self-defense, we took enough time to explain the basis of that invocation. Because if you don't do that, the enemy will define you. And immediately we launched a self-defense for self-preservation and the defense of freedom and territorial integrity. We took responsibility for our actions. Good or bad, we took responsibility for our actions. That is responsible leadership. Let me take you back in time, and I will be very short. And I would like you to, if you have a piece of paper and a pen, take down some notes so that it's going to help you when I have moved forward to talk about the attitude of the French, Cameroon, the United States, the Swiss, and why it is critical for you not to lose sight of the reality that the only thing that has given Ambazonia respect from the butchers of our people is the armed resistance. And why, as I disagreed with the US ambassador, it is what is going to provide us full territorial control and the defense of our freedom. International borders, I've said this before, international borders mostly follow natural topographies. Forget international borders, even local borders, domestic borders. So if you see the border between, let's say, Mezam and Momo, you'll find that you have the river Mezam. That's a natural topographic feature. To leave the state of Manyung into Biafra land, you find a natural topographic feature. I think the river Manyung. You find the Atlantic Ocean divides us from Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea. That's how borders usually are formed. Because these borders are containers, what we call a natural habitat. They contain people to live together for a long period of time to develop a common system, common value system, a common way of life. Then giving themselves in bigger societies what you call a nation. That nations are formed through these natural barriers that contain people within particular geographic space to enable them through their different activities, whether hunting, the different aspects of their culture, to develop common systems of interaction, communication, and a way of life acceptable to them. In the formation of states, nations are provided with political institutions and structures to oversee the activities of nations. That's how you call the nation state, because on the basis of the nation, states are created. You also have the fact that not all nations are within natural habitats where there are topographic features that prevents movement of people from one place to the other. As we are aware that the Widikum people, you have the Tikari and the others, are all result of long periods of migration and settlement. So not all nations are formed based on those natural containers, which are topographic, geographic features. But in the majority, and so was Ambazonia, I have named these natural topographic features that hindered a lot of interaction with other people, for our people to be able to develop unique cultures. These cultures can also be developed through colonialism, where the colonial masters are able to provide some other systems that are copied by the people, like in Ambazonia, the common law system, the Anglo-Saxon system, which is unique in the sense that in the entirety of Ambazonia, the British left behind this particular system, joined with our own customary practices and tradition. So, borders are also created by treaties. That means an international agreement between two states or more states. It could be bilateral, it could be multilateral. So two states can say through agreements, through understanding that this is our international border, and they sign a treaty and it becomes binding on those two states. So it can be invoked in areas of adjudication, in times of conflict. It can be referred to for other purposes. But critically, the essence of the creation of states is also for the reason of accountability. Because the international system, though anarchic in nature, it feels like there is no government that can put order, works on the basis of states providing the kind of security that makes the international system stable for international transactions. And so the creation of these demarcations makes it possible for governments to be held accountable when things happen within their territorial space or in areas of their jurisdiction. You might have a particular area where you have a jurisdiction might not be part of your territory. Like the British had jurisdiction over Hong Kong. Hong Kong was not part of the landmark territorial space of the United Kingdom, but you could hold the United Kingdom accountable for what happens in Hong Kong. So that's the essence of international borders: accountability, order, stability, and what have you, is the basis of the existence of the international system. Now, in 1919, the border between Ambazonia and Cameroon was demarcated. The international border, in what we famously call the Milner-Simon Agreement. It was an agreement between the Foreign Ministry of the United Kingdom and that of France, accepting that international border between Ambazonia and Cameroon. It is very important for our people to know that this treaty formalizes Ambazonia as a separate territory from that of the Republic of Cameroon. It is on this formalization that the mandate system and the trusteeship system could assign that specific territorial space to the United Kingdom. And it is on the basis of this formalization that the Republic of Cameroon gained independence on the 1st of January 1960, following these borders. This is very important, Ambazonians. The struggle for self-determination is valid for both peoples who are integral part of the territory of another country and for people who are an occupied territory. That means even if You are an integral part of a particular country, like you take the case of Biafra. You can invoke the right of self-preservation. You can invoke systemic injustices as a basis for the right to external self-determination. And that is valid under international law, as we've seen in various international treaties that have been signed by major countries, including Nigeria and the Republic of Cameroon. But that of Ambazonia is not simply a claim for external self-determination. It is that of decolonization, that on the basis of a formalized treaty demarcating two states, the state of Ambazonia existed. It does not mean we did not exist before 1919, but we are all aware that even the concept of statehood is as early as, I think, 1648. Kingdoms, monarchies, what have you, have existed. The concept of statehood is as early as 1648, what they call the Westphalian notion of nation state. And it has taken root since then up till now. But territories have been existing under different forms. Now, why I'm taking you down this path is important. I will come to link it up with the Swiss intention, the statement of the American ambassador and the attitude of the French, and the arrogance of Cameroon. And I'll tell you why there is no law, religion, or morality, or army that will ultimately disfavor a people who are fighting to maintain the land which is their natural habitat. And this should sink more to the Americans and to the French. Ambazonia has had, I think, 3 governments. It's a constitution, different branches of that government, a House of Parliament, almost a Senate like the House of Chiefs. Ambazonia has existed as a state, more stable than Cameroon. We have never been part of Cameroon. The presence of Cameroon within Ambazonia is based on the violation of a key international law principle, that of uti possidetis juris. Attempt to extend your border at which you gain independence illegally, in violation of, I think, the Article 4 of the African Union Constitutive Act, which is based on the international law principle of uti possidetis juris. You can't simply change your borders at independence, even if you manipulated all Ambazonian leaders, even if you had a more powerful army. Without a treaty with Ambazonia, you can't turn a de facto incursion into the land of Ambazonia into a de jure one based on 60 years of international acquiescence to this illegality. It can't work. We aren't dummies. Not by virtue of the fact that you invaded our country and nearly turned everybody into a Cameroonian singing your anthem and waving your flag, and you've recruited amongst us thousands of enablers who've been parading distorted version of history should that make your presence in our land legal or acceptable under international norm? The basis of our resistance is not simply the right to exist as a people, is based on the maintenance of an international order that is the basis of international peace and security post-World War II. The concept of territorial integrity and sovereignty over a people's land is the basis for post-World War II international peace and security. It's anchored on that. It has been made relevant by different alliances led by the United States, championed by the French in setting up the European Union, championed by the United States in setting up NATO, the United Nations, to maintain a post-World War II international order that guaranteed peace, to eliminate the Hitlerian idea that you could simply roll tanks across borders, take over pieces of land and impose yourself, or the Napoleonic era where you think you could simply just bomb your way and claim people's land. Because you are powerful, because you have powerful friends, and because you have sources of money, credit, weapons. The assumption by the international system that we are an integral part of the Republic of Cameroon flies in the face of evidence I've presented. That they are not aware that the case of Cameroon's presence in Ambazonia is that of pure occupation, colonization, and usurpation, thuggery in broad daylight. It's an anomaly. This assumption informs the attitude they are displaying today. My fellow people, we are not the funchas. Oh. We are not the funchas. Now, because they think you are an integral part of Cameroon, the basis of every diplomatic initiative for the resolution of the conflict, and remember this, the basis for the construction of the architecture of any negotiation is based on bringing peace to Cameroon. You don't exist. The notion of justice for Ambazonia, which is to decolonize Ambazonia, does not exist. I am not talking from hearsay. All these discussions that they are having on Ambazonia has nothing with your freedom to do with your freedom. It has something to do with the preservation of Cameroon as one state with Ambazonia as a colony. Because of the assumption that you are an integral part of the state of Cameroon. And sometimes this assumption is based on stupidity, or what I may call lack of interest in researching the problem. When the Oxford Research Group finalized its research, it realized that we are not an integral part of Cameroon. That is why I think in its recommendation 5, it made it clear that independence cannot be ruled out in any framework in bringing peace and justice in that area. The Americans, foreign affairs, whether Senate, the French, the British, they still believe in the kind of Cameroon narrative that we were one and the white man came with the long sense or the big sense, I'm not quite sure. That old narrative My fellow Ambazonians, we are at war. This assumption has not only informed the attitude of the international system, it has also informed the attitude of the different mushroom groups that have emerged to benefit from the pain of the Amazonian people. Instead of following the nationalist path, they've been confused with terminology. Anglophones, West Cameroon, Southern Cameroons. That's how they always announce their entry. Through the back door. They want to please the international community. They want to portray themselves as somehow politically neutral. At the same time, they want to be part and parcel of the discussion for an outcome. This is the tragedy of 60 years of political manipulation by Cameroon. That even highly educated intellectuals are still ponchos piloting with the question of identity and statehood of Ambazonia. Ambazonia is their new experiment for all sorts of schisms. I know when you people heard the French president was flying down to Yaoundé and everybody was expectant, everybody was waiting. This is what I'd like Ambazonians to know. And I have said this before. The international system has failed to establish a common approach to bring pressure to bear on Yaoundé to commit itself to negotiating itself out of Ambazonia. The singular reason for this failure has been due to the reluctance of the French. The second reason is based on the assumption that we are an integral part of Cameroon and so give preference to domestic endeavors. The French have been the stumbling block for any international common approach to bringing pressure to bear on Cameroon. I will not go further into that. The policy of the Ambazonian Governing Council has been that to have the opportunity to exchange views with the French. Because we have said and said repeatedly, it is for the French interest for Ambazonia to have its freedom as an independent state. It is not for the French interest for Ambazonia to remain as an occupied territory of the Republic of Cameroon. And we have sought ways to communicate this view to the French. And my Foreign Affairs Department will continue to seek the opportunity to have an exchange of views with the French. 1789 was the French Revolution to overthrow a monarchy that was curtailing and deprived so many people of civil liberties and opportunities. It is sad and shameful that the French have adopted an approach of always taking the side of tyrants. It is sad that the French have not come to the realization that ending its romance with tyranny that has led to genocide, bloodletting, pillaging, and suffering is for the interests of the values underpinned by the 1789 French Revolution. And that since 1960, the French have maintained this reliance on butchers. It has not helped France's standing at the international community. It has not helped France's values at the level of the international system. It has not helped the expansion of French values. When you find a state that has made it its policy approach never to side with peoples, but to rely on tyranny and oppression as a way of conducting foreign policy. The French were the primary initiators of the rapprochement in Europe that has led to the creation of the European Union. French ideas inform the European Convention on Human Rights, and Strasbourg, being the place where it's headquartered, speaks volume of the divide between France's approach at conducting foreign policy, especially within the continent of Africa, and its approach at the articulation of internationally acceptable norms and values within the continent of Europe. After 60 years, after 1789, when the monarchy disappeared, it is inconceivable, shameful, that the French will contemplate the monarchy in Gabon, contemplate the monarchy in Togo, contemplate the monarchy in Cameroon. And despite the pain and suffering that these alliances of convenience have brought to bear on even the Cameroonian people, that in the 21st century, exactly 2022, when the Arab Spring overthrew tyrants, when thousands of people rose up across the Arab world, some supported by the French will still maintain a deafening silence to the agitations and whisperings and the desires of millions of people to rise above the calamity that has been imposed on them 60 years running. Let me state this and state it clear to the French. Ambazonia is a reality, and I would like the French to factor this reality in conceiving, formulating, and articulating their foreign policy going forward. Ambazonia is a reality. We all read the interview of the American ambassador, where he said there is no military solution. As I said in my response, that I know he was communicating that to Cameroon. But it's like reading a love poetry in the cemetery of the dead. As I wrote, Cameroon does not believe in negotiations. One of the underlying principles in the construction of treaties is the notion of good faith. That because treaties do not have overarching enforcement bodies, policing bodies, the good faith of the actors who enter into treaty is critical in their respect. Cameroon is not a good faith actor, as we have seen since 1961, when they manipulated Resolution 1608, adapted their constitution into La Constitution Fédérale and imposed it on us, dissolved and eliminated political institutions within Ambazonia, recruited bad actors that could act in furtherance of their political objective of occupation. The Americans know like Churchill knew. We need the Churchills at this critical moment, not only for Ambazonia, in dealing with international issues. There is no space for the Chamberlains. We need bold leadership from the Americans, clear and concise leadership that recognizes the fact that Ambazonia is a separate state from Cameroon. The Cameroon's presence is defined as occupation. And if occupation is bad in Ukraine, if it was bad in Kosovo, they should be bad in Ambazonia. And there must be clarity, a powerful message sent to Yaoundé. Ambazonia should be armed. The Kosovars were not only armed, they were trained, probably not to defeat Serbia or Yugoslavia, but to create a balance of power that reduces the level of impunity. Ambazonia should be armed not only by us, but by people who believe in territorial integrity and the preservation of sovereignty, by countries that believe in the post-World War II international order that anchored peace and stability, that has led to the creation of world and opportunity for millions and reduced conflicts between nations. The Americans know that La République will not negotiate. The Americans know that La République is pivoting towards the Russians to get more sophisticated weapons, including drones, to map out burn down Ambazonia. They have not taken a clear-cut stand. They have instituted cosmetic measures that defy the logic of millions of our people displaced, a conflict classified by the Norwegian Refugee Council last year as the most neglected and this year as the third neglected. That this soft approach to tyranny, to a system of deprivation that has led to the loss of lives of not only Amazonians but even Cameroonians, destabilization in the Gulf of Guinea, acute corruption that has led to diseases, that has led to instability created by the lack of opportunity, should get the anchors of that international system to take a more bolder stand. This timidity in attitude, cosmetic approaches, hypocrisy has not worked before. It wouldn't work now. We aren't simply rising up today in an armed struggle to defend our land. We've spent 60 years trying to negotiate basic opportunity and access to education. A legal system that presumes you are not guilty until found guilty by a court of law. We've spent 60 years begging just to have hospitals, a curriculum of education that makes us an asset to ourselves and our people. We've spent 60 years to beg simply to have a GCE board. The tyranny has responded with bullets, kidnapping, rendition, murder. It has captured our finest men and dropped them in jails, and nobody is raising a finger. The world is more concerned with stability for international transaction rather than with justice. We need the Winston Churchill, not the Chamberlains. When our teachers and our lawyers rose up to beg for crumbs in the land of their birth, the architect sits right there in Yaoundé, Tassang Wilfred, locked up as a teacher, professors kidnapped from Nigeria. You want our kids to go to school. Here you have the teachers locked up in jail. Barrister Ayembe is there. What have teachers and lawyers done wrong to whisk them off from their chambers and their classrooms in furtherance of an international curtailment and deprivation? What is Poundfor doing in jail? An architect of peaceful rights to self-determination for the past 25 years, whisked from Nigeria and locked up. That's the system that the French president has flown into Yaoundé to assure them of his support and the support of his country against an 8 million man army of Ambazonia. I hope I'm around for a long time, my people. I hope I'm around for a long time. The world will know, as Tassang declared, who owns that land. Don't count on them. They are part of the problem. I want every Ambazonian above the age of 18 to enroll in any of the forces nearby. I ask all commanders to begin recruiting. Those who refuse to enroll must be arrested and taken to barracks for training. All young men above the age of 18 have an obligation to join a defense force. It's the law of the land. Use everything you have, bow and arrows, stakes, to defend your block. This is your natural habitat. Our forebears fought for the French. Our forebears fought for the preservation of the ideals of freedom. They fought to ensure that Buckingham Palace didn't crumble under the heat of the Luftwaffe of Adolf Hitler. They made sure the GIs who crossed the Atlantic could get back to the United States, just to return back into their own natural habitat, and their land, their country is sold. My fellow Ambazonians, this is the struggle of our lifetime. I know we have our own differences. We will continue to have differences. As a people who have been colonized for 60 years, intoxicated, manipulated, you do not expect all of us to be on the same page. But I expect every Ambazonian to be on the same page on the right of the Ambazonian people to self-preservation. We can disagree on method. We can disagree on approach. We can disagree on how to articulate on different issues. But there is one thing every Ambazonian, both scientifically proven, agrees on: that the occupation must end. And the world must be on our side, the side of people fighting for freedom. It cannot take the side of tyrants who can hear, who can speak, looters of treasuries, murderers who should be facing criminal charges for war crimes, crimes against humanity. Our people have been murdered, violation of international law, commanders captured, including women, and then murdered, bodies dumped on the street, bodies of our soldiers paraded as games shot in the Serengeti. That is the price we have to pay for a plebiscite imposed on us. That is the price we have to pay for peace and tranquility in trying to construct a federation that preserves the two identities of both nations. That is the pay you're giving Ambazonians. I can assure you, as I've done before, the state of our resistance is strong. I ask you to sacrifice more. It is not going to be a walk in the park. You might not even make it. This generation might be wiped out. We might never even have graves. The alternative doesn't work well for us. We will not raise the white flag. Let the United States ambassador understand this. The claim of Cameroon over Ambazonia has come to an end. And it came to an end through military defeat. Ambazonia has ended Cameroon's political legitimacy within Ambazonia. It has come to an end. All mayors, DOs, SDOs, fake parliamentarians who either remain in exile in Cameroon or surrender themselves in armored cars. Our forces are strong. They control the land. That is what it means to be free, to control the land. Only those who control the land have a claim to that land. Cameroon has lost control. It has disjointed military control of Ambazonia with the sole aim to assert or reassert political control. That will never happen. It's important that the international system recognizes, one, that Ambazonia is not part and parcel of the Republic of Cameroon. Two, that the presence of Cameroon in Ambazonia is that of occupation and the illegal extension of border. And three, that the Ambazonian forces have defeated Cameroon. The recognition of this reality will lead to the construction of an international architecture to end the conflict that reflects the reality of both historical, legal, and political reality of the moment. We are not the generation that will acquiesce to illegality. We are not the generation that will be bribed into submission. We are improving in terms of our delivery systems. Our men will move from planting IEDs to making rockets that can deliver lethal force 20 miles from where they are launched, and to producing assault rifles that will help the defense of the homeland. Those men who are called illiterates have become technologically savvy enough to understand that the self-preservation of Ambazonia requires our collective ingenuity. And I appeal to our people not to give up, not to surrender to the schisms even amongst ourselves. We continue to differ. I call on all of you to continue to arm our brave men and women, to sacrifice more, to give in your all, so that that natural habitat, if not preserved for you, will preserve the ideals and values and norms that the next generation will look back and take pride in your sacrifices and contribution. God bless you all. God bless Ambazonia.
Hail this land of glory, we the Ambazonia, pledge our loyalty. Praises to our Savior who granted us the freedom. Allegiance to the hero who brought the lonely gather. Glory to glory, we rise and never to fall. Here in a nation, flowing with earth and holy. Glory, glory, glory to the Father for making you a nation, a joy forevermore. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meet in our need, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God be the watchman of this nation. Ambazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meet in our need, and your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God be the watchman of this nation.
This has been a live address by the leader of the Ambazonia War of Independence. Thanks for staying with ACN, the Liberation TV of Ambazonia. Welcome to ACN. The Liberation TV of Ambazonia. Stay tuned on ACN TV. We will be right back.